4.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you might know, my name is John Young, and I'm the President and CEO of Columbus Regional Healthcare System. To my right is Dr. Sam Wheatley. Dr. Wheatley is a GYN surgeon. He's our Chief Medical Officer, and he's a 20-year-plus board member, and he's also the board chair of our Finance Committee. To my left is Dr. Evangeline Gonzalez. She's the chief of the CRHS Hospitalist Group and one of our best experts on the COVID-19 virus. You might notice she's not here. The reason she's not here is because we have so many COVID patients upstairs. She has to take care of patients this afternoon and couldn't join us. So we'll carry on without her. Though the COVID pandemic has made 2020 a difficult year for our country, our state, our community, our hospital, and for each of you, as we begin 2021, there is light at the end of the tunnel. We have learned so much about this virus since March and how to treat it. We know how infectious this virus is. We know how many can become infected and become carriers of the disease, infecting others while having no symptoms at all. We know that when infected, many will become very sick, especially the elderly and people with comorbidities. We know that the virus is primarily transmitted from one person to another through droplets and vapors that everyone exhales. We know that if we wear masks, socially distance, and wash our hands frequently, we can vastly lower the spread of these vapors and therefore the spread of the virus. And we have developed clinical tests to determine who has and who does not have this virus, whether you're symptomatic or not. Science has developed treatments, monoclonal antibodies, to help keep certain positive patients from having to come into the hospital at all. Science has also developed medications, remdesivir, to help COVID patients who are already in the hospital be able to stay out of the critical care units and off the ventilator. While all of this is good news in slowing the spread of the COVID virus, the best way to protect ourselves and get our community back to normal is now being rolled out through vaccines that are both safe and effective. This is what we want to talk to you about in this session. You have questions about the vaccine and its rollout, and we are here to answer those questions. So let's just begin. I'm going to start with Dr. Wheatley. One of the concerns we've heard, Dr. Wheatley, in the community and from some of our staff is that many are concerned that the vaccine could cause infertility. What can you tell those with that concern? Is that something one should be worried about?
No, not at all. There's no scientific basis for that. That came from a poorly designed study in Germany in December and really has very little scientific merit, but has taken traction on the internet. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists say that there's no evidence that the vaccine or the virus causes infertility. The Society of Reproductive Endocrinology and Infertility say the same thing. The CDC and FDA all agree with that position. So there really is no scientific basis for the vaccine causing infertility.
Well, that's good news. What if there are long-term side effects that haven't shown themselves at this point? Is this a hindrance for any? And what are your thoughts on this?
In vaccine development, although typically it's taken a long time, what does happen with long-term side effects, most of them come to light in 60 days after the vaccine. Now, there are rare events that might take longer to surface, but most come in 60 days. Both the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine is approximately 44,000 patients, the Pfizer vaccine about 37,000. If you take some out that didn't get to the second dose, you got about 75,000 patients in these two studies. It's double-blind, controlled with placebo. The short-term side effects after 60 days when the clinical trials ended show really no long-term effects to that time and has a high safety profile and high efficacy.
So low risk and high return. One of the questions that people have asked, some feel that the vaccine may have come through the process too quickly and therefore maybe not fully tested. You answered that a little bit, but could you expand on that some?
Yes, vaccine trials in this country are slow, but they're slow because the funding's slow. The platform for this vaccine is messenger RNA platform. This platform's been around for 10 or 15 years. We use this platform to get a Zika virus vaccine, Ebola vaccine. So the technology and the platform have been around for a long time. What made this vaccine be developed so quickly is that the federal government funded 7 or 8 companies, and the funding was fast. That was Operation Warp Speed. And so they funded this, and all but Pfizer took that money out front and developed these vaccines, these 2 vaccines. They're both messenger RNA vaccines. They both work the same way. No shortcuts were taken in developing these vaccines, and no shortcuts were taken in the FDA approval process. Only shortcut was the funding was quick. Okay.
And that's great.
The process is not shortcut. I've read both clinical papers, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine. The studies are excellent. They're good basic science. The research is excellent. The clinical trials are excellent. And the FDA approval process is excellent. It's not shortcutted. It's not deleted. It's just fast because the money was there to develop the vaccines. And the technology was already there. So.
One of the things that we've heard as a concern from the community and also from our staff is that this vaccine is safe for adults but not approved for children. So what does this tell us about the vaccine, and is this a concern?
No, because this is classically the way we develop vaccines. We test vaccines in adults first before we test vaccines in our children. This vaccine was tested in adults. The Pfizer vaccine was tested in 16-year-olds on through old age. The Moderna vaccine was 18 years old on through old age. Testing will probably begin in children in the next 6 months. We have no indication or suspicion that these vaccines won't be safe in children. We just not have the studies and don't have the numbers. Till you get the clinical numbers and go through the clinical trials, the FDA will not even give a emergency authorization for the vaccine. So that's the only reason it hasn't been done for children. And most people feel that it's going to be safe for children too.
Okay. We've all been taking flu vaccines for years, but some folks can't do that because they have allergies to the vaccine. Is that a concern with this COVID vaccine?
Not really, but there are several caveats. Most flu vaccines are an egg protein-based vaccine. Most flu vaccines are an attenuated virus vaccine. This is neither. There's no attenuated virus in this vaccine, and there's no egg in this vaccine. This is a messenger RNA vaccine that is placed in a lipid envelope, and that's the best way I can describe it. That envelope is polyethylene glycol, called PEG. It's the same, that compound's in Miralax, okay? So it's highly used. The other one's called polysorbate. Once the vaccine is injected, that envelope goes away, and then that harmless messenger RNA creates a harmless spike protein that resembles the spike protein in coronavirus. As soon as that spike protein is put in there, antibody formation starts. Within the first week, you get IgM antibody response, and then by 6 weeks, you get IgG, which is the longer response. During that time, the envelope or the lipids that we talked about being in the envelope, they're excreted in the urine, and the messenger RNA is excreted in the urine. And all that's left are the antibodies. They never enter the cell nucleus. They cannot alter the DNA. They just cause antibody response. And at some point, and this is what we don't know the answer to, how long does that last? We don't know. We will be testing those antibody responses for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years. And then when that antibody response is gone, and it will be gone, then it's time to revaccinate.
So for those who aren't clinical in the audience, what I think you said is that this should not be a concern about allergies, because it's a different kind of...
Let me address that a little bit. In the original study of 75,000 people, there were some, especially on the Pfizer study, some severe allergic reactions, okay? To date, with all the doses that have been given with Moderna and Pfizer, there have been only 29 severe allergic reactions. And those reactions have been to the polyethylene glycol or the polysorbate. They have not been life-threatening. They have been treated with epinephrine. There's only been one hospitalization. There have been no deaths. If you take that number, that means that 1 in a million people will have a significant allergic reaction to this vaccine. Now, the caveat is if you have severe allergies and have to carry an EpiPen with you, then I think you ought to ask your physician, should you take the vaccine or should you wait for a while?
Mm-hmm. Okay. But you really can't get COVID from this vaccine.
No, there's no COVID virus in the vaccine. The vaccine has no attenuated live or dead virus in the vaccine. You cannot get COVID with it. And the messenger RNA cannot affect your DNA that's in the nucleus.
So this next question, not a lot of people will say it, but a lot of people are thinking it. Some fear that the vaccine is some sort of ploy against the American people and here to do harm or track or something like that. You certainly know the science here. You know the vaccine. How can you help people get a little more comfortable about what is going on here at the cellular level?
If you assume that, then you assume you're putting something in somebody that stays. And you can track them. It could alter their DNA. Neither of those are true for the vaccine. It's like I said, it causes a spike protein that's harmless to be formed. Antibodies form against it. If the coronavirus, you are infected with it, then those antibodies attack the spike protein. The spike protein are what gives the coronavirus the ability to enter the cell. So you're mitigating the coronavirus's ability to enter the cell. So nothing's left behind. All that's excreted. There's no markers. You know, once the antibodies are gone, there's nothing left there. So it can't be used to track anybody. It can't be used to alter anybody's DNA. The science is that messenger RNA does not have the transcriptase to enter the DNA molecule and alter your DNA.
Great. One of the things that we've seen around the country, certainly in our own community, is that many people unsure are waiting to see how it goes with other people who've gone before them. What can you tell us about that? And you know, and how are we rolling out the vaccines and you know, sort of address that concern?
Right. You know, I mean, as we started the rollout, the federal government did a prioritization, which and the states followed that mostly. And that was, you know, 1A healthcare workers, and then 1B over 75, and then they changed 1B to 65. So what's happening, the queue is getting much bigger as you add a prioritization. I think the only caveat I would say about waiting to get the vaccine is that you're competing for vaccine as the group gets larger. So if you didn't take the vaccine in your prioritization group, you're competing with everybody that's coming along with you. So and I do think that there may be a supply chain issue down the road, or there certainly is now, and there's certainly going to be logistical distribution issues, and there are now. So I would say, you know, sometimes haste makes waste, and procrastination may be that you don't get one. So that's what.
So for example, if you're over 65 and we go to the everybody in tier, if you're 65, you've got to compete with everybody in the county to get that vaccine.
The 1As, the healthcare workers, have to compete with all that group at 65 and over. You think how many individuals and boomers there are that are 65 and over. It's a huge part of the population. So healthcare workers are going to have to compete with those to get the vaccine because you can't cut in line once your group. Now you're still eligible for the vaccine, but you can't cut in line.
Okay. All right.
The other issue about this, John, is, you know, we started out with the idea that we would give the first dose and hold the second dose. Well, the federal government's already said we're not doing that. We're releasing all the vaccine. And so if there's a short supply, not only may you not get the first dose, but you might not be guaranteed the second dose.
So that's a really good question I suspect people are concerned about or
Right.
wondering about.
Right.
Flu is 1 shot a year.
Mm-hmm.
With COVID, it's 2. What is that purpose of the second one?
We just don't know yet. There's been some, I think we're going to look at that. Both shots are 100 micrograms of messenger RNA. The Pfizer vaccine is, a dose and then another dose 3 weeks later. The Moderna vaccine is a dose and another dose 4 weeks later. AstraZeneca is a dose and then another dose 4 weeks later, and it's not been approved yet. And the efficacy of the AstraZeneca vaccine is about 70%. The good news about the messenger RNA vaccine with Moderna and Pfizer is it's a messenger RNA vaccine, and the efficacy of the vaccine is 94.1 for the Moderna and 95% for the Pfizer vaccine. The one thing about the Moderna vaccine that's good, in the 5% that got COVID positive, none of them were hospitalized and none of them went to critical care units. So it mitigated the severity of the disease. So even if you are in that 5% that get it after you're vaccinated, you're not likely to get sick.
Well, just as a personal note, I have turned 70 this year, and as you can see, I'm a little overweight. I worry about my glucose, but I've taken this vaccine and I've taken my second one, and I've had no side effects
Right.
and no reactions. And in about 2 weeks, I'll be at about 94% protected. Is that the way it is?
That's the way it is. That's the way it is. Most people, their original studies are saying now that you're anywhere between 50 and 80% protected 14 days after the first dose. And then you get to that 94, 95 after about a week after the second dose. So, you're pretty protected. One thing we didn't talk about is the vaccine and pregnancy. And I want to address that. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine, the FDA, and the CDC all say the vaccine should not be withheld from pregnant patients. Now, the caveat with that is we haven't studied the vaccine in pregnant patients in large numbers. In the Moderna study and in the Pfizer study, patients would have a pregnancy test that had to be negative, and then they would, start the study. In both those studies, ironic, there were 23 patients in both those studies that became pregnant after taking the vaccine. None of those patients had any adverse outcome from the maternal side or the fetal side. So we think it's very safe in pregnancy. Again, I think you'll see a large-scale study in pregnant women coming, just like you'll see in children.
So I think the message I would send is that, the dissemination of the vaccines are very well controlled by the government, by the state. We have to follow those rules.
Right.
The first tier was to take care of the forward-facing people who are taking care of COVID patients in the hospital. And now it's been expanded to rolling out to 65 and above. We are in partnership with the health department. They are providing a lot of the community-based vaccinations.
Right.
We're going to be doing some through our own physician network. But as we get more vaccine available to us, we're going to try to help the health department and the community get this vaccine out. But we're very controlled on how we can do that. Is that correct?
That's correct. And again, this is a moving target. The administrations are changing. They're changing the way they're going to do things a little bit, I think. And it's going to be allocation. And it's going to be allocation, increasing allocation you must use what you get, okay? Because they're going to give it to somebody that's using it. So we need to develop a logistical distribution plan that lets us distribute as much vaccine as we're allowed so we can get more, so we can grow the number of people we can vaccinate.
So I guess the last question I have here is, when and where can I get vaccinated? I think that's still being rolled out. The health department is the primary community channel for this. We're going to help all that we can. But again, our guidance from the state is to make sure that the healthcare workers are here to take care of your loved ones should they get COVID and need to be in the hospital.
Right.
One last thing before we close. So one of the issues I think everybody struggles with is there are a number of people who get COVID and they don't get sick.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about the other side of that coin. People who get COVID and get very sick. Talk about what that looks like from a clinician standpoint.
You know, I think we have some generalizations about it, but we don't have specifics. The generalizations would be, the older you are, the more risk. The more comorbidities you have, the more risk. But there are young people that get this that don't have comorbidities that do poorly with it. The vaccine has a couple of pathophysiology paths that it takes. And one of them is kind of a coagulopathy or blood clotting disorder that increases the risk of strokes, heart attack, pulmonary fibrosis in the lungs, long-term effects. One of them is just like a viral pneumonia, a typical viral pneumonia. So we haven't really figured out why individuals specifically do well and the other ones don't, other than generalizations. But we haven't specifically figured that out yet. So. And I think we will as time goes on, as the vaccine, is given, and we go down this road.
And I guess evidence of that is this empty chair sitting right here, where our expert in this area is up taking care of patients because we've got lots and lots of COVID patients upstairs. Just for the community to feel comfortable, we have always been ahead of the curve here. We've not run out of beds or ventilators or supplies. Staffing has been a challenge, but we've sort of stood up to that challenge. So we're taking good care of patients here, whether you have COVID or whether you don't have COVID. But again, we want to do all that we can with social distancing, with the mask, social distancing, washing your hands. That's not going to stop it. It's going to slow it down. And the reason we want to slow it down is because if we don't, we can overrun the capacity of healthcare systems. You can see that across the country in certain places. If we can slow it down so that it doesn't overwhelm our healthcare capacity, that's good. But it's not the answer. The light at the end of the tunnel is we get our communities vaccinated.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And the avoidance of large gatherings is another piece of the puzzle that's important. We need to continue all that until we can get a large proportion of our population vaccinated. That's going to take us some time. If you start looking at the numbers and how we're vaccinating, it's going to take time. Dr. Fauci says he wants 1 million doses in 100 days. That'll be a challenge. Yeah. That'll be a supply chain challenge and a logistical distribution challenge. We already see that. But the public can help us a lot if they'll get vaccinated and they'll do the things you mentioned.
So we thank you for listening. I hope this has been helpful. Dr. Wheatley and I both very much believe that the vaccines are the answer, and how do we get more vaccine into the arms of people in our community is something we work on every single day. We're here to help you. The hospital is a safe place to be if you need care. We have staff that are getting COVID, but it's much more likely they're getting it in the community than in the hospital because we have PPE processes in place. We have all kinds of equipment to make sure that we're not transmitting these viruses. So, we've been speaking about COVID patients, but if you're a patient that has some other ailment or some other chronic disease working on you, please don't put it off out of fear. The longer you put it off, the worse that it is. Come to us, we'll take good care of you. Any closing thoughts?
Yes, I had the privilege to get to take the vaccine, first person to take it in Columbus County. I read both Pfizer and the Moderna papers, front and back. I read all the FDA studies, protocols. I felt completely safe in taking it. I feel completely safe and recommend it to my children, adult children, and my grandchildren when the vaccine gets approved for under 18. So it's safer than any vaccine we've ever put out there.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for your time.
You. Thank you for having me.
This has been great. Your expertise is unchallenged. It's amazing how much research you've done for this. I'm not a clinical person, but I am wowed by your expertise, and When you say it's okay, I say it's okay.
Well, you know, we don't lead by opinion, we lead by example. So I was the first one to let somebody stick a needle in my arm.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.